Welcome everyone to our special evening with Dr. Bob Macauley, who is a personal friend who I met through Courageous Parents Network in the early days of starting Courageous Parents Network, and has become someone who I don't just like, but really admire professionally. And I have never had occasion to work with Bob in his capacity as a physician because he did not take care of my daughter, nor have I had the privilege of seeing him actually practice clinical care. However, I know him as a person, and then I read this book. Bob treated me to an early draft of his memoir because I knew you. I loved it. Um, and not too much changed if I recall from the early draft to what it is now. So I'm really excited to be able to do this conversation with Bob and to ask him questions and have you hear him talk about not the book per se, but his journey as a human and all the hats he wears and all the hearts he has. And then I do encourage all of you to go out and get the book. I will tell you quickly that we, CPN, had our second class of parent champions last week in Boston. Several of them are here tonight. I see Eddie, I see Blair, I see Kathy. And Bob was kind enough to send copies of the book for all of them because, as I told them, if you want to see all the different ways that pediatric palliative care can look, doesn't always look this way, but different ways that it can look, not all the ways, different ways. This is a brilliant start, not just their own experience, but the breadth and depth that you cover in this book, Bob, is really extraordinary. Okay, enough of that. If you could unmute yourself, Bob, because people need to hear you. And we will get started. What we're going to do is I'm going to ask Bob questions and we'll talk about the book. We'll talk about his practice, his life, and then we'll leave time at the end for you to ask questions. If the number of people here doesn't grow, you can just raise your hand and we'll call on you. If it gets significantly higher, I'll ask you to put your question into the chat. And then just for our own record, could you please put into the chat whether you are here in your capacity as a parent, grandparent, caregiver, or in your capacity as a clinician? That would be helpful for us to know. All right. So,
could I dive in and just say thank you? Thanks for having me. And Blythe is sort of classically self-effacing. So I just want to say that I didn't just send her a copy to be like, hey, FYI, there were 4 people I sent drafts to whose opinions as clinicians, as parents, as people who are gifted writers that I really admire. And I said, I need some help. Tell me what you think. Tell me what needs to stay, what needs to go. And so you've been part of this journey from the first readable draft. So thank you for all that you've done and all that I've learned from you, not only from this part of our friendship, but also so many other areas.
well, thank you, Bob. All right. Plus, we share a love of Vermont, a passion for Vermont. All right. Why did you write this book?
That's a great question. So there have been several books written over the last probably 5 or 6 years that tell the stories of adults who receive palliative care. And then some beautiful books, like one that specifically comes to mind is That Good Night by Sunita Puri. And I like to read, so I've read several of them. And as I was reading them, I thought to myself, these are beautiful books. And pediatric palliative care is different. That while it has some similarities to adult palliative care, there are some areas of pediatric palliative care that are really unique, and kids' stories deserve to be told in a way that I didn't feel like they had been told. So a few kids that I'd taken care of over the years, they came to mind, and I thought that's interesting. And then the next day, a few more kids came to mind, and eventually I started writing names down so I wouldn't forget anybody. And I thought to myself, there's some energy here of a story that should be told. I reached out to about 2/3 of the families I was still in touch with. And I reached out to say, I'm thinking about this. What do you think? Would it be okay if I tried to write something about your child? And that led to some incredibly powerful conversations. And then I wrote chapters and we came back and tried to correct what I got wrong and flesh out what I didn't address enough. And it was an incredible opportunity for reconnection and remembrance. Um, and then it took a while to get it published because let's just say a book about kids who mostly don't survive is not exactly what most agents and publishers are yearning for. And I was very, very fortunate to find a wonderful publisher who said, this is important stuff. People should be able to have a chance to read it. And it's been quite the journey.
It is really not a book about children who are sick and dying. It's about children, families, clinicians, people showing up for each other, the courage of children, the courage of parents, the courage of clinicians. You have some beautiful stories of colleagues who do amazing things. I mean, really, like it makes me cry just thinking about some of the mountains that people move to get children home, or to get children to New York City, or it is really this book is the opposite of cynical. It is the antidote to cynicism, and that's never a bad idea. I would say that too. Um, I think while people will learn this when they read the book, I think it would be helpful, Bob, to just remind people or to tell people, those who don't know, that you are not just a palliative care physician. Can you just do the sequencing of your professional training, that the multiple hats you wear? Because I do think that makes you have your three-dimensional perspective is not just because you are a palliative care physician. I think it's because of the other things too.
So I was debating when I
Wait, your audio just went a little weird.
was back
Oh, nope, come back.
I didn't
There
get
you go. You're good.
right. So when I was in college, I was debating about whether to go to medical school or whether to go to seminary to become an ordained minister. And I was fortunate enough to find out I didn't have to choose. So I did a combined medical school divinity school program. And I was ordained in the Episcopal Church right around the same time I graduated from medical school. And then I did a residency in pediatrics. And for a while, I tried to do a little bit of one and a little bit of the other. But it was a situation where that was not really sustainable, especially as our kids were growing up and I had other responsibilities. I'm seeing stuff in the chat about my volume being low.
Yeah, I think it is low. I think we just need you to come a little closer.
Okay, I'm sorry, my
Yeah,
head's going to look really
no,
big.
that's good. You've got a good head. Good
Okay.
head.
So I did a combined medical school divinity school program, and then I tried to do a little bit of one, a little bit of the other. And there's really no such thing as a part-time priest or a part-time physician, so that wasn't really a workable plan. And then I found clinical ethics, which I thought was a perfect blend at the time, of the things I like to do. At the same time, it's a bit cerebral for me, and I miss treating kids because most ethics is about adults. And our hospital didn't have a pediatric palliative care program. So I said, why don't we start one? And I did a lot of apprenticing and book learning. And one of my favorite quotes, which I mentioned in the book, is from Rita Mae Brown. She said, good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment.
Mm,
So let's just say I was acquiring a lot of experience.
yeah. Well, you talk about learning. People, are you guys still okay? So, Bob, pause everyone.
Yes.
Oh, well, wow, that just got louder.
Is
Okay.
this better?
Oh, way better. Yay, way
Okay.
better. I don't know what just changed, but
I just cranked everything up on my volume.
okay,
So
way better. Okay. Um, well, thank you. Anyway, you didn't miss much. No, I'm teasing. The when in the stories that Bob tells, you do weave in the extent to which you're the fact that you are trained as an ethicist, and how that thinking informed it, and also just uh, your training in ministry, because I love one of the things you wrote in here. Uh, Oh goodness. First trained as a priest, I got used to not being able to fix things because as a priest, I was never expected to, which proved helpful that afternoon in the PICU. And I think that's a good stepping off to the fact that sometimes you talk in the book about particularly physicians are trained to fix and solve, but as we know in palliative care, some things are not fixable. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I think physicians are fix-it people, and that's a good thing. Like I had surgery on my foot. I wanted my surgeon to tell me he was going to fix my foot. Like I wouldn't have done much for my confidence if he was like, I'm not sure I can fix it, but we can try and make it a little bit better. I didn't want that. At the same time, as you said, there are certain situations where we can't fix things. And for many physicians, we sort of are left to wonder, what is there for me to do? And there
Mhm.
are other people involved in that patient's care. Palliative care, I often say, is a team sport. So maybe it's time to pass that off to people whose job is not as much to fix things. At the same time, I think that part of being a physician is also companioning people down
Yeah.
the path that they walk. And even if that means I can't fix things, no matter how much I might long to. And so there's an old saying in spiritual care, it sort of flips the old thing about don't just stand there, do something. And it says, don't just do something, stand there.
Hmm.
And that's kind of unnatural for physicians. It's not how we're
Yeah.
trained. But being a priest, I knew what that felt like. And so when, as a physician, there was nothing more for me to quote unquote do, I felt like I kind of understood a little bit about the importance of presence that my priestly life had informed me about.
Do you find, Bob, that in your practice as a palliative care physician working alongside those, um, let's say, particularly physicians who haven't been trained that way, that you have to, that you have had to help them stay in the room?
Sometimes, and I think part of it depends on what their personal journey is. Everyone has a journey outside of their profession, so they may have had personal experiences. And I think we all grow over time. I certainly am a much different person than I was 20 years ago in terms of the things I've learned along the way. So I think that it's an opportunity to help people see what they can still give, even if it's not cure, and also come to grips with what is going on inside of them. So one of my favorite scholars is a guy named Sheldon Solomon. He is a professor at Skidmore College, and his claim to fame is something known as terror management theory. And it basically means that when we as human beings are confronted with something that impacts or makes us question our own mortality, that we seek comfort in the familiar. And if we don't recognize that, it drives decision making and it infuses bias into a situation. And what they have found is that taking trainees and giving them an exposure to palliative medicine decreases the impact of terror management theory on their decision making because they become not comfortable, but maybe a little bit more comfortable with the notion of mortality and the notion of the end of life. And so I think that it's a journey that we're all on. And I think part of what palliative care is not just dealing with patients and families, but also supporting our colleagues through things that they may not be as familiar with as we are given the nature of our work.
Mm. I so the book itself, each chapter tells the story of a different patient and family that Bob worked with, and then Bob weaves his own life or what's happening with him in that moment through the chapter also. But the chapters themselves are not named after the patients, or the people. Patient is such an impersonal word. I really don't like the word patient, but they're not named after the children or the children's parents. And sometimes the children are the focus and sometimes the parents are the focus because the child can't be a active player in what's happening. And Bob is primarily interfacing with parents, which of course is something that Courageous Parents Network is particularly attuned to. Um, but what I'm struck by, Bob, is that one of the things I was struck by is that as a parent, it was very comforting for me to see how these children stayed with you and influenced you and um, changed the way you practice, changed the way you were humid. And uh, I wonder if you could say a little more about what your conversations were like. You don't have to name the parents, but with the parents when you followed up with them to say, I'd like to tell our story, I'd like to talk about you and your son or daughter in my book, what that was like for them. I don't see any of them here. I did invite a few of them here, but I think they were not able to join, so I can't ask them what it was like. Oh, here she comes. Joy is here. I can ask Joy. But if you could start by just saying what it was, how would you describe some of those conversations with the parents when you followed up with them?
Yeah, my experience, pretty much without exception, was no matter how much time had passed, it felt like no time had passed.
Mm,
Um, like obviously a lot had gone on in their lives, and sometimes we were remembering back to events that took place 10 years earlier. So this is quite a number of years ago. And it felt like we were just back in that moment when we were talking about what their hopes were for their child and what their worries were. Um, the Zoom calls went on for quite a long time. I remember very vividly, I was on service, so meaning I was taking care of kids in the hospital here in Oregon. And over the weekend, just happened to be one weekend, I had three of these calls, these Zoom calls with parents for the book. Each of the calls lasted about 2 hours, involved a lot of tears. And I can still remember by Sunday night, I found myself thinking, I really got to get back to the hospital because it's less emotionally draining, the work that I do on a daily basis than these calls. Like they were incredibly fulfilling. At the same time, we were talking about some of the most important things in life. Um, and I also, to go back to your first point, I hope it means something. Like the
mhm,
conversations I've had with families where sometimes they'll say things like, well, you treat a lot of patients. And I'm like, yeah, but that may be technically true, but I will never forget your child. And
mm,
not just a memory, but an impact. And
mhm.
what I not only learned, but as the book goes on cumulatively, for sure, like I'm a different person because of that.
Yeah, yeah.
In the title of the book, Because I Knew You, is drawn from some lyrics to Wicked, the musical and also movie now. And the line from this song called For Good is, Because I knew you, I have been changed for good.
Mhm.
And that's the message of the book is
Yeah.
I feel like I tried to do good work, but I know for sure that I have been changed for good.
That comes through. Part of the change, and Bob, your volume has gone down again, so you might be covering up your mic or something in some weird way with I don't know what's going on, but just lean on in. More of your face is good. I think
Okay.
oh, that is really good. That's fantastic.
So in my defense, like the microphone is right there. I can't even reach it. So I'm not sure what's going on, but I'll keep trying to talk as loud as I
But
can.
that's great. What's going
Okay.
on right now is great. Um, the I'm wondering, did you talk with your colleagues at all? I mean, you have some close friends who are colleagues, um, about what it was about writing this book, and did they have opinions about uh, revisiting patient families and stories and that intimacy? Did you get any weird vibes or were they like, oh God, that's gorgeous. I would love to do that. Obviously don't name anybody if you have, but because you're open, you're showing how in a way that I think any parent would find very reassuring, the extent to which clinicians are touched by the families and children they work with, and that they remember them, and that they stay with them, and that they can be changed by them. But that is not something we hear about unless somebody writes a book. So, anything from your colleagues about this?
Well, a couple of the people, in addition to yourself, that I gave the very early draft to are our physician colleagues. They were both very encouraging. And a bit of that is selection bias. Like I chose people who I thought would be kindred spirits in this endeavor. Um, the most common response I think I got was a combination of, are you allowed to do that? Because there's increasingly in the medical literature, there's caution about writing about patients. And so I would stress that everyone I was in touch with, I got their consent and their participation. There was a little bit of wondering. I still have some wondering about the first third of the book are patients that are from so long ago, I'm not in touch with them anymore. And so as a result, I changed details to hide specific identities. Um, it's hard because I don't know how, like, if they'll ever come across the book, if they'll recognize their child, if I got something wrong, because I didn't have the chance to correct whatever I got wrong in conversation. So I do wonder about that. But the general sense I got from my colleagues was this should be happening, maybe more than it actually is. And I also think that in the context and in the culture of academic medicine, so much of what we do are investigative studies. And when I meet with the larger pediatric palliative care professional community, there's some incredibly gifted researchers who engage in research that I barely even know what the words mean. When they talk about like ethnographic mixed methods research, I'm like, God love you. That's great. I don't actually know what that means, but I'm sure it's really important and I'll enjoy reading the article that you're writing about it. And so I can't do that. That's not my skill set. And so I kind of wonder, for me, I can't do that stuff, but maybe I can do this stuff. And maybe this stuff is an area that we haven't spent as much time. And to go back to your very early point, the goal of this book is not to sort of preach to the choir. Like people who are engaged in pediatric palliative care, they may not want to read this book. Like they might say, look, I do this every day. I don't need to go home and read about what I do every day. And that's totally cool. The hope is that there are people out there who think that palliative care is just about dying.
Yeah.
It's not. Everyone on this call knows it's not. But a lot of people don't understand that. And when people think about kids, like when I tell people what I do for a living, and I don't usually tell them the whole truth, I have to confess, like I just say I'm a pediatrician. And then they have this idea of like healthy babies and immunizations, which general pediatricians do way the heck more than that. But that's what they think. And I let them think that. Because if they really want to know, they'll ask. And I'll kind of give them a lot of off ramps before we get to the point where I actually tell them what I do. Because a lot of people don't think there is such a thing as pediatric palliative care because there shouldn't be. Like kids shouldn't get sick. It's wrong, but they do. And someone needs to take good care of them in addition to their families. And so helping people understand that hopefully will move the conversation forward.
I'm so glad you just said that, because that's one of the things that I loved, appreciated most about this book is that you literally come out and name so many of the things that come up when a child is sick. Why me? Why my child? This is unnatural. This shouldn't happen. Am I a good parent? What does it mean? Like you all, so many of the things that we talk about at Courageous Parents Network, and that the research, the qualitative stuff talks about in the research, you weave it all the way through this book. It's one of the reasons I really wanted the parent champions to read it, is that it's so educational about the ocean of emotions and feelings and terms, and I don't mean the medical terms that are out there in the field of pediatric palliative care, including, you talk about the good parent. Um, and um, and so it's so comprehensive, Bob. It's also for anybody who is not medically sophisticated, and that includes me. Bob does a really good job of explaining what these conditions are. Like he explains in like 3 sentences what a trisomy is, what bad, Gaucher type 3 is, like he just like I was like underlining. So like med students should read this. The as some people know, one of my favorite things, the bodies of research, is Dr. Hines and others who've extended it, the good parent research. And let's be clear, there's no such thing as a bad parent. It's only focused on what parents feel like they need to do to feel like they're being the best parent possible for their child who is living with a medical condition, serious medical condition. And, one of the stories that is particularly haunting, and it haunts the reader, and I think partially because it haunts you, is the story of Colin, the extraordinary drummer who had cystic fibrosis. And you talk about how at the end, part of what being the doctor to that family was, or the palliative care and the chaplain, and no, not the chaplain, and the minister and the ethicist, is addressing the parents' feelings of failure. But if you read the whole chapter of Colin, they haven't failed him for 1 millisecond. So it's illustrative of what can happen, right? How parents can feel like they failed their child, even though they were the most extraordinary parents. Oh, audio. Okay. Oh, no, wait, don't know what's happening. Nope, nope, wait.
Any better now?
There, yeah, you're back.
Okay. All right. So they are incredible parents. But his mom said, she put it very elegantly. She said, my job was to protect my child. My child died. Thus, I didn't do my job. Like that is incredibly elegant logic. And it's hard to escape. And no matter how much someone outside the family, like someone like me, says, well, that's not true, like they feel the way they feel. And my hope is that over time, they have had a chance to look back and see, like, they are remarkable people. They stood by their son in incredible ways. They made decisions that I look back and like, that must have been incredibly hard. And they had this great quote where they're like, it was the easiest hard decision we ever made. To let him go off to Europe and tour with his band, even though the doctors said, you might not survive this trip, but it was so important to him. And then he had to come back early, and they drove to JFK Airport, picked him up, and then drove him straight up to Vermont to the ED to be admitted to the hospital because he was that sick. And I looked at them like, how did you do that? Like, that is an incredible amount of devotion to set aside every protective instinct that you have in order to do what's right for your kid who might not and did not ever get that chance again. And that's how they did it. And I hope that one day, maybe today, maybe they can see themselves through my eyes or the eyes of others to see what incredible parents they are.
Oh my God, I wanted to hug them. I wanted to hug all the parents. And that's the other thing. One of the reasons I would recommend this book for parents of children who are either actively caring for children living with illness or bereaved parents is this book helps you see that you are not alone, and it helps you see the the all of the amazing ways that your fellow parents show up for their children, which I think probably helps you see how you are showing up for your child or showed up for your child. And also maybe the sneaky doubts that, creep into your head, that Bob is, you know, opening up the closet and showing the scary thoughts that come out, or the self-doubt. Um, uh, on the self-doubt note, in the chapter about Grace, Grace is an exceptional story also, or she was clearly, all of these children are exceptional because children are, but this seems to be it's a little more involved, because maybe you can describe quickly towards the end, what happened with Grace in terms of New York. And then the quote, and then I'll say what is really struck me that you wrote about Grace.
Yeah. So Grace was a girl who had
Oh, come
neuroblastoma.
closer again.
She was a girl with neuroblastoma who had I had been following for many years, and neuroblastoma is a really bad kind of cancer. And eventually we ran out of treatments, and it was very clear she was in the summer before her senior year of high school that she was not going to survive very much longer. And her dream was to go and see Broadway. And I was like, I don't know how to do that. We were living in Vermont. She had terrible pain in her spine. She could barely drive down the street in her mom's car. There's no way we're driving to Manhattan to Broadway. And some really incredible, I'm seeing people say they can't hear. Are you guys
Yeah,
okay?
it's happening again. Will you unmic your mic? I mean, mute and then unmute.
How's that? Is that better?
Mm.
I have
Oh, now
no.
that's better. That's better.
Okay. Better now?
I see you.
All right. It will come back. Is it better now audio wise?
Yes, better
Okay.
now audio-wise.
Okay. Love tech. So the bottom line is some incredibly creative people found a way to tap into a local foundation who loaned us their corporate jet. And we flew down, me, Grace, her mom, a nurse, and the nursing student who is an amazing person who arranged this. Met with the Cake Boss, who is her favorite TV personality on the set of the Cake Boss. Went to see Wicked, and she got a backstage tour, and she was literally glowing after that. And the next day, she took a carriage ride through Central Park, and we had a little time just being quiet and sitting and getting her some rest in FAO Schwartz, like the grandest toy store in the world. And then we got on a plane to go back to Vermont. And that night, she took a turn for the worse, came back to the hospital, and then she died the next day.
Mm.
And I think anyone who has known somebody with a serious illness, many people, despite all their courage, they fade away a little bit at the end of their life just because the disease is really hard and there's so much going on. And Grace never faded away. She lived her best life until the very, very end. And one of the things I loved most about Grace, one of the many, is that should was just not in her vocabulary, or shouldn't certainly was not in her vocabulary. She's like, I'm going to do that. I want to do that. And we had some tough times where we had some disagreements about decision making that I wonder if I did the right thing. And her approach was always, if your heart's in the right place, we're going to start again tomorrow and we're going to work together and I'm going to tell you what I need. And she taught me so much.
Yeah, you in that chapter you write, you talk about daring to trust that your heart was worth following. If my heart was in the right place, I dared to believe it would be enough for my patients. And I think that what a noble North Star to have. If you can trust your heart, then you can. And parental love, right? And then your observation of what parental love looks like, because quite a few of the stories in here are children who are too little or too compromised to make decisions for themselves. And at which point you are deferring to and respecting and trusting what the parent love looks like. And it doesn't always look like what I think my parent love would look like, but you are respecting it and you can see you working to ally or align yourself with the parent, like really working to get to that where you can not be judgmental at all. Like just really, this is what their love looks like. And it's not morally harmful. Um, and then, and also trusting what your own perspective is on what's going on.
Yeah, so this is something I don't think you and I have talked about. So as I mentioned before, I sent the early draft off to 4 people, one of whom was Blythe. And I think Blythe, on a very profound level, I thought to myself at the time, your opinion is the one I value the most of the 4. And the reason for it is that
there was always a bit of trepidation in writing this book, even having a chance to talk to the parents of most of the kids involved to make sure I got as much right as I could, because I talk about this when I am an observer in some ways. Like I think I get very involved in my patients' lives, but it always comes back to the fact I can't count the number of times I've had parents of my patients say to me, "You have such a hard job." And my response is always, I know one job that is way harder than mine. And so, yeah, it's, I go very gingerly and tenderly into saying anything about what a parent of a child with a serious illness experiences, because I am only an observer, hopefully a close observer, but I have not experienced that myself. And that's one of the reasons that I have such intense admiration for the work that you and CPN does, because it gives a voice to the people who really know firsthand things that the rest of us are observing from a slight remove.
Mm. Well, you're generous to say that. And I actually will, you know, when I started Courageous Parents Network, I'd only met a few families and I'd had my own experience. And I began CPN with some very strong opinions about what good parenting looked like and good medical decision making looked like and good parent advocacy looked like and good shared decision making. And that's almost all gone because the more people you meet, the more you see all the ways it can look, and the less judgmental you become, because with very few exceptions, it's all driven by love. And it shows up in different ways for different people. And so I saw a lot of that in your own evolution, or at least the way you talked about it, because and this is why I think it would be a very good book for med students to read, or no, not just physician students, but anybody training to work in pediatrics or medicine at all. It doesn't matter, social work, nursing, chaplaincy, physician is Bob, you meet some complicated people, not all of them, but you meet some complicated people, and Bob doesn't he describes them and you can see how complicated they are, but then you read as he is trying to get at or just bringing compassion and understanding to what this is. And he kind of unpacks it. It's really a gifted exploration. I found it like really impressive the way you did that. And I'm sure having been, your ministry, your bioethics, and your palliative care training must have all played into that. Yeah. Um, okay, another thing, and then I'm going to ask you to read, and then we'll open up to questions. One of the things that I'm wondering how because you're also an educator, Bob, how you teach this. And it goes as follows. Just because dying is hard doesn't mean that nothing can be done to make it less scary. After practicing palliative care for a while, I had eventually recognized that there was never a good time to talk about dying, and the desire to put it off had more to do with my desire to avoid a hard discussion than from respecting the patient's wishes. That conversation needed to happen. I think you're talking about Colin in that instance, but do you teach this? And how do you, well, in 2 minutes, how do you teach this?
Well, I think part of it is, I think a mirror is a very helpful tool when it comes to practicing palliative care in particular, which is what's going on inside of me right now that might be driving things that I'm projecting out on somebody else. Um, so like, for instance, one of the issues we sometimes get into is when the medical folks are like convinced that something is not going to work and we can't believe that parents are asking for that thing that we are sure is not going to work. And so the question for us is, how do we get the parents to stop asking for it or accept they're not going to get it? And my usual response is, why are we so sure? like maybe there's good reason, but let's look in the mirror first. And I think the same thing holds true. Every time I say to myself, this family, they're not ready to talk about this. This is serious stuff. We need to wait. I try to look in the mirror and say, is this me? Like, do I just want to have this conversation that might be a really intensely hard conversation and talk about awfully terrible things that nobody should have to be talking about? And if it's about me, then I got to put that aside and try to do my job. But that's one of the things I love about palliative care. Like, it's not task oriented. It's not like I have a checkbox and I need to go do this. Like, this profoundly human interaction between the people providing palliative care and the patients and families who are on the receiving end, and what does that mean, and trying to tease that apart. Like, I think that's where wisdom comes in.
Mm. Yes, wisdom, which comes with experience. The only way to get it is to break some eggs. All right, Bob, can you please read the section we talked about, page 310 to 311, and then we'll open it up to questions. Why palliative care?
Right. So it's a bit of a long passage, but I think this is really kind of the key book, part of the book for me. So the book starts off with someone asking me why palliative care, and I circle back at the very end to say, what would I answer that now after 15 years of retrospect? And I say, because I would answer Dave, who asked the question, now, if I had another chance. Were it not for this work, I wouldn't know how brave and honest and wise and generous human beings can be. And this is going to reference a little bit about my own childhood, which had some pain associated with it. I was raised to believe that children should act like Exhibit A at dinner parties and to overlook the contradictions of what I call a bizarro world. My patience, though, showed me that being a kid doesn't mean doing what you're told. It means battling for what you know in your heart is important and true, and occasionally crying yourself to sleep at night when everybody else would rather believe children don't ever go through what you're going through before dusting yourself off the next day to fight even harder. Asking for what you need while forgiving people when they can't give it to you as long as their heart is in the right place. And definitely defying predictions, especially the self-fulfilling kind. Meanwhile, their parents dare to plan ahead for the day their hearts will break, or in order to shield their babies from suffering, hold them for their entire lives, or send their teenager off to Europe to follow his dreams, hoping, but definitely not praying, that he'll survive long enough that upon his return they can get him from the airport to the hospital in time. Along the way, they say stuff that doesn't make any sense to people who want to believe that children never die. Like, this is the best, hardest thing we've ever done, as Dave and Julie described yet another sleepless night of rocking Ella. And as Daniel and Miriam recalled being able to hold their daughter Lily for only a few minutes, we are the luckiest, unlucky people in the world. You'd think that after all the heartbreak they'd been through, after their child died, they'd stay away as far away from hospitals and doctors as possible. But instead, they return to the site of their greatest pain in order to cuddle critically ill babies most people are afraid to even touch. They pump breast milk that, in a more merciful world, would nourish their own baby, then ship it off to a distant state for an adopted kid they've never even met. They stand before a sea of white and tell doctors who'd forecast their child's demise that they shouldn't believe everything they were taught in medical school. And they testify before legislators and create educational videos so that other parents in the same situation won't feel as alone as they once did.
Thank you, Bob. That very last part was a plug for CPN. All right. I would love to invite, we now come to the portion of our program where we invite people to turn their camera back on if they are willing, and to raise their hand if they would like to ask Bob a question or make an observation or anything. Now is your chance. Ooh, come on. Oh, maybe people. I can keep going. I have lots of things, but I want to see if anybody? All right. Oh, Eddie. Yes. Unmute your, yes.
Here we go. Nice to meet you, Bob.
Same here, Eddie.
Quick question. How would you present in a very short and concise manner how important palliative care is to parents who may be resistant to it?
That's a great question. So palliative care, as I think most of us recognize, is a charged term. And there are different philosophies of how to do that. Some of my colleagues who I have great admiration for come right out and say, you may have some misunderstandings about palliative care. Let me dissuade you that this is not what it is about. I personally take a different tack. So when I meet families, we're sort of fortunate here in Oregon because our team name is Bridges. It's been that way for a long time. So it doesn't have any kind of name in there that's going to trigger anything for anybody because nobody knows what that is. And so we go in and we talk and we ask families what they're afraid of. We ask them what they're hoping for. We talk about what comfort looks like for their child. We ask them how their journey has been, where their sources of support come from, how we can bolster that, how we can be companions on the journey. And then at the end of that conversation, I'll hand them my business card of our team, and it says the Bridges Pediatric Palliative Care Team. And then I'll say, that thing we've been doing for the last hour or two, that's palliative care.
Mm.
And I think I find that works better because as soon as I say, you think it's something, but it's not, it sort of plants the seed in people's mind that it's the thing that I just said it's not. And also there's that thing like when people keep telling me that they're not something, I kind of think to myself, I think you are that. I just don't think you want to accept the fact that you're that. But if we model it and we say, this is what we do, then hopefully they're like, oh, I want more of that. And then I said, cool, let's walk this path together.
Mm.
Deal. Thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
that's good. Anybody else? I can't see if somebody's raising their hand. Oh, Renee. Okay, yes, Kelly, write your book. The Joy, I don't know if you are if you're, I know you're here, but I don't know if you're actively here because you are oh yes, you and Cora are one of the chapters in the book. And if you unmute yourself, if we could hear, and you're willing to talk, to say what it was like to see Cora's story and the impact of you and your daughter, who's now, how old is Cora? 11, 12?
She's 11. She'll be 12 in September.
Wow. Wow.
I'm
So,
sitting here in tears. Sorry, this has been awesome. And this is my boyfriend, Eric. He's jumped in as stepdad 100% and been amazing. And I've been sitting over here explaining to him how excited I was to meet our new palliative care doctor when we moved to Iowa because of Dr. Bob, and how I just don't understand how a family couldn't ever have anything but excitement about the concept of having palliative care, and how there's a note in Cora's chart now anytime somebody types in her name that basically says, hey, listen to her parents. They know what they're talking about. Do what they say. And just, yeah, I don't have any more positive things to say, but I just don't understand how anyone couldn't think the best out of that profession.
yeah.
And thank you, Dr. Bob, and thank you, Blythe, and thank you.
Great to see you.
It's so good to see you. It's so good to see you. I think that's the thing about palliative care, right? Like if you've had it, then you realize like who wouldn't want this? It just makes everything it makes everything better. It makes a bad thing less bad. It can't make
a voice and an advocate and a teammate, and yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's so true. It can't fix the stuff that can't be fixed, but it makes a lot of the things that are existential, which is what lingers always and sticks with you always. It makes that stuff better. Allison, you've got your hand up.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm sorry that my technical difficulties are limiting my camera right now, but thank you, Blythe and Bob, for this. I'm a pediatric critical care nurse and with a vested interest in palliative care. And this question might not be able to be answered, but at the institution where I work, our palliative care team is exceptionally resource constrained. It's 1 to 2 doctors, a couple nurse practitioners, and a nurse coordinator. And we're not huge, but we're the only pediatric hospital in our state. And every kid deserves palliative care in my mind, and very few have access to it. And unfortunately, there's a lot of factors at play right now limiting, expanding access to resources, especially for children, which is insane. But I'm curious, Bob, or any other providers here, how you have proven the value of palliative care to an institution, and so that they invest in it in a way that makes meaningful difference. Thank you so much.
So, Allison, thanks for your question. Thanks for the great work you do. It's sort of a $1 million question about how you grow programs, especially given the fact that palliative care, as we all know, is very labor intensive, and we don't get a chance to bill very much, and we'll never really pay for ourselves. So I think there are a few things to say. One is the stories of families are compelling. So I'll never be able to justify our existence to someone who all they care about is a spreadsheet, because more money is going to be going out than is coming in, like unless you just happen to have some amazing philanthropy happening. So I think it's the patient stories that are important. I also think that palliative care has an impact on the culture of an institution. So if you got a bunch of parents who are like, we love palliative care, but you have all your colleagues in other specialties saying, we don't really like working with them, they're not helpful, they don't listen to us, that, things like that, that's not going to further your case from within the institution. And the last thing I would say is, we talk about palliative care, and I know what you're referring to is sort of like specialist level palliative care. There's been a big drive over the last, especially 10 years, to focus on primary palliative care skills that everyone should have. I sometimes say that if there was a hospital that the only people doing palliative care were the palliative care team, I probably wouldn't want to be a patient there or have a loved one who's a patient there, because everybody should be able to do certain things, maybe not like highest level stuff. So in situations like that, is there a way to leverage the resources you have in order to provide training, mentorship, support for others to do core palliative care skills that then frees up the higher level, more specialist trained palliative care folks to do the work that really is at the top of their license, so to speak, while you sort of perfuse the whole institution with basic core palliative care skills? I think that could be really important.
Thank you, Bob.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, the Center to Advance Palliative Care has some things on what to take to the C-suite, but yeah, I think palliative care is needed more than ever now, because it's the opposite of I feel like it must be like in some ways help an antidote to some of the burnout that's probably happening, and the moral distress that's happening everywhere, especially in hospitals. One of the lines you have in your book that goes to what you just said is, survival data got me thinking, but personal stories got me feeling. And, if C-suite decision makers can focus on the feeling and not just the numbers. Kathy Burt, who's one of our parent champions, Bob, put into the chat, I think I understand this question, Kathy. Physicians who are when there's no fix and they're trying their best, what can be done to encourage them? Kathy, what do you mean by encourage? Do you feel like there's a fear of like giving up? What do you mean?
Thank you so much for giving me the chance to clarify my question. Because what Bob said earlier about fix, that really struck me, because we have a wonderful group of physicians really trying their best, but my daughter is just a puzzle. It's just a mystery. And then when they're, the harder they if a parents can, what can parents say to ease their fixed mindset? Because sometimes when there's no answer, doctors try harder. How do they try harder? By fixing it more. And then it's, if just she doesn't ever get sick, it will help this one symptom, this area, but then is overshadowing the life quality that she's missing out. So it seems like the tension, which we don't have them, but when they're really trying really hard to fix, and it's even harder to encourage them to look at the life quality. And it is harder to look at themselves in the mirror, that where they're coming from, because they're very focused on fixing. And so I'm just trying to learn and get advice, or just some from your interaction with other physicians, what can parents say, which is not parents' job or responsibility, but we're working as a team, right? What can a parent say to ease that fixed mindset, saying, hey, I'm not trying to have you answer all these 500 questions that fix my daughter right now, but I am asking to just try our best, or show up, or basically help their mind to ease a bit, so they can come hopefully a little bit more on the human side, or the feeling side.
Oh, Bob, come back, your audio.
Is this any better?
No, do your audio off, audio on again.
Okay, it's back on.
Yeah,
Is there-
yay.
Why that works, I have no idea. So I was saying, Kathy, thank you for your question. I'm not sure if I have a great answer to it. I think that one of the things that I think I wish parents didn't have to do this, but I think that in certain situations they do, is to reframe in terms of goals. So it's one of the core things we do in palliative care, that we try to sort of rise above the question of like, what procedures are we going to do? What medications are we going to do? What are the goals that this family has for their child? Because everybody, especially specialists, they only have a specific angle. Like the pulmonologists, they look at the lungs, right? The cardiologists, they look at the heart. Also, you only see what you see. So especially for inpatient doctors, they only see this kid at their worst, because usually you're at your worst when you're in the hospital, because if you weren't at your worst, you wouldn't have to be in the hospital. And so they don't have the perspective that parents have, because parents are journeying with their kid every single day. So I think that while I wish it weren't the case, part of what I think parents can do is to say, our goal is this, and to try to paint a picture for what their child's life is like in ways that that physician can't see, not out of criticism for that physician, but you only see what you can see. And if you only see a patient with one specific organ system that you're focusing on, or you only see them when they're at their sickest, you don't have an appreciation for what the rest of life is like. And maybe there can be, if you want to take a bit of a risk, give that physician explicit permission to say, it's okay if you can't fix this, or I understand, or it might not be worth it for us to try yet another fix, because our goal is whatever it might be, time together as a family, not being sedated all the time, whatever it might be, because everything we do has a downside for the most part. And so that could be something that might give that physician permission to say, maybe I don't have to do all this, because there are times, the physician mindset is, I want to fix stuff. But there are times you're like, I wish I didn't have to do this. I don't know if this is going to help, but we just want to help so much. And inviting someone into a sort of a deeper conversation of, what if the way to help is actually to do less, or to focus on the things that are most important? Those are just some things that come to mind.
Great answer. Thank you.
Great answer. Yeah, I think, we talk a lot about physicians giving parents permission, but I think it's also parents giving clinicians permission to I'll be okay if, you know. Blair, you are going to be our very last question, and then we're going to say goodnight.
Sounds good. Hi, Dr. Bob. Thank you for being here tonight also. I wanted to ask you, because you have a very interesting background with you having kind of that interest in ethics, also being a palliative care physician, because I guess, how do you balance those two things within you? Because sometimes I feel like that maybe the medical provider ethical, what they might seem as ethical isn't what the families are feeling is ethical for their child. So how do you balance that when you're kind of in those talks with families?
Oh, uh-oh, we got to do your mic thing.
Am I back?
You're back.
Okay. Great question. So a couple of things come to mind. One is kind of what I was saying before about using a mirror. Like if I think, well, that's not ethical, like, why do I think that? Like, is that my values coming out? Am I misunderstanding the situation? Am I wanting to do something that I feel like I'm constrained to do? And is that because I need to do this out of my own sense of professional obligation? So like what's going on within me is one thing. The other piece too is I don't know if I have good evidence for this, but I'm still convinced it's true because I've seen it multiple times, is that one of the big differences between palliative care and ethics is I think ethicists, to their great credit, are very concerned with precedent. Like if I do this in this case, I have to do it in every similar case. And I don't think palliative care people care as much about precedent. I think that they care about this kid in front of them. Um, because while there might be other kids like that one day, there will be no other kid exactly like that one day because this kid is their own kid and this family is their own family. And so I think that one of the ways that palliative care, I think, can influence or impact ethical decision making is not to throw precedent out, to not say like that's not important, but to really kind of hammer down to like the uniqueness of an individual situation and try to figure out what makes this potentially different from other situations. And then also try to really understand where the parents are coming from. Like every time someone says to me, you know, this family or this patient is acting or asking for something unethical, in addition to the mirror, part of me is like, there's a story here. And I think most people are trying to do the best they can with what they got. And going back to what Blythe said earlier, I think parents love their kids. They're doing something out of love here. So did we not communicate something well? Am I not understanding something? Is there something like my mentor, Bob Orr, once said that if you don't understand why someone's acting in a certain way, there's a skeleton in the closet. And I don't mean that in a nefarious way, but there's an experience, there's a memory. Like we had a recent case where there was a kid who wasn't able to breathe on their own and likely needed a tracheostomy in order to do kind of continuous ventilation, but almost surely was going to grow out of that. And the parents loved their daughter and they were like, no, we don't want that. And everyone was kind of perturbed by this fact, like, why don't they want this? This is the right thing to do. And so we sat down and talked for a long time. And it turns out that mom, the patient's mother, had an uncle who at a very young age had essentially a cardiac event, had very severe brain damage, and is in a nursing home, has been for over a decade, on a ventilator, unresponsive. So when we said tracheostomy, what I'm saying is this is a bridge. There's another, we got to get over this river. There's another shore on the far side. But the image in her mind was, I don't want my baby to end up like my uncle. That makes perfect sense. But that was a story that had not yet been identified. And then that gave us a chance to talk about what's different about this and to honor her protective, wonderfully protective spirit with regard to her child. Like she didn't want that for her child. And when we said, we don't want that for your child either, like it was this transformative moment in the conversation. Because instead of arguing, she's like, oh, these people, they're beginning to get me. They kind of understand where I'm coming from. And then we can have a conversation about what's right for her child and how that might be different from what else has happened in her family.
Yeah, just be curious. I mean, it's not just, it's hard to be curious, but probably not as hard as we think. All right. It's dinner time in Portland, Oregon. It's bedtime in Boston, Mass. I know where some of you are. It's time for something wherever you are. Bob, thank you so much for your time. Can you tell us, and for writing this book, can you tell us when it's going to be available for those who wish to buy it, which I strongly encourage?
Thank you. So it's published on June 3rd. It is available for pre-order on Amazon and various other outlets in both print, ebook, and audiobook formats. And all proceeds from the book go to worthy charities, mostly to support pediatric palliative care at my institution, and a portion to a wonderful group called Darkness to Light that is focused on preventing child sexual abuse. So all the monies that are spent are going to good purposes.
Love that. And do you do the audio reading?
I do the audio reading. Like when you and I don't think I had a chance to talk about this. Every time I thought it wasn't going to get any more real, it got more real. So in March, I spent a week doing that, and it was like the words leapt off the page in a way that was even more profound than what happened when I wrote them. So yeah.
Wow.
It was quite an experience.
What we didn't talk about in this book is Bob talks about some things from his childhood, some of his closest relationships, significant personal loss in friendships and innocence, I guess. So there's a lot of being a child and being a grown-up in this book, as well as a lot of being a physician and palliative care person in this book. So there's just a lot in this book, and it's beautifully written, and I strongly recommend it. Okay, thank you, everyone.